Today we are going to tell you how to play Scotland Yard.
So let's begin.
Here's what the game's about. So there is this criminal called Mr. X who has been roaming around central London, and it's up to the detectives to find him. So first let me introduce you to the tickets that each detective gets and what they are used for. They are basically used to travel from one place to another in the city. Let's start with what each detective gets. So each detective has a colored pawn and a colored badge. These are not a part of the game, they are just to represent the detective. And Mr. X gets a clear pawn with no color to represent him as Mr. X, and he also gets a blank ticket which is not a part of the game to represent him. Now, each detective gets 10 taxi tickets. Here I am showing one of each ticket, but each of them get 10 taxi tickets to move around. Then they get 8 bus tickets to use the bus lane, and they get 4 underground tickets to move around. But Mr. X gets unlimited amount of tickets because as one detective uses his ticket, he's basically spending the ticket, and that ticket goes to Mr. X. We'll talk about it in detail later. Now let's just see what the tickets do.
So I'm going to tell you what the tickets do. Can you see these lanes here, and each of them has a colored line? The taxi ticket, which is a yellow ticket, can only be used to travel in these yellow lines. For example, let's come to this line. You can see there is a red dotted line here, and there is no yellow lane that is visible, which means that I cannot use my yellow taxi lane and I cannot travel. I'll have to use an underground ticket instead. An underground ticket is resembled by the underground pass is resembled by a dotted red line, and a bus ticket, if we come over here, you can see is resembled by a green line. There are a few lanes in the map where you can travel with any three of these. Right here. Now, the detective's movement will be seen. So, if I'm this green detective and I am at 147, and if I use a taxi ticket to travel, I can travel. The disadvantage is that Mr. X will see that you have used a taxi ticket and will also see where you are. Now let us talk about Mr. X's movement. The cars Mr. X has are...
Of course, Mr. X has unlimited amount of taxi, bus and underground tickets which he is going to get from the detectives.
So if I am a detective and I use a taxi ticket to get my way from 169 to 156, the taxi ticket goes for the taxi ride, but also it goes to Mr. X.
Now, this black ticket is basically also for Mr. X, and we will go deeper into this later when we are in the game. And these X2 tickets that also only Mr. X has, we'll also check those. This blank white ticket is for Mr. X, just to resemble that he is Mr. X. So these are basically the cards that he has. We'll go into the 2X cards and the black tickets later on.
How to start the game?
To start the game, in the box, there are a few blue tickets with the numbers of the points around the board. We need to take all these cards, put them upside down and mix them. Then we need to, each detective and the fugitive as well has to pick up the card. Now as the detectives are a whole detective team, after they pick up their card, they can just show it to the rest of the detectives. Now the advantage for this is now Mr. X can also see what starting point they have. But Mr. X won't show his starting point to the other detectives, or all the detectives will just start surrounding him. So he will just keep that to himself. This set also comes with a logbook and a grid. So now let me tell you the use of this logbook and the grid.
How to use the logbook? So you can see there are circles and rectangles. So what is Mr. X's thing? Now, as we said in the starting of this video, Mr. X is not supposed to keep his pawn on the board, or the detectives will know where he is. and we are not even supposed to disclose Mr. X's starting card. So if Mr. X's starting card, suppose he got 86 as a starting card, he will start at 86, but he won't place his pawn there.
Or put his finger.
Yes, because then the detectives will know where he is. Instead, he won't even write it down. But if he is taking a taxi ticket from 186 to 104, he'll write 1. So he's used a taxi ticket. There's a yellow lane between 86 and 104. He's used it, and the second point, he will write it down in the logbook like so. But then the other detectives will see. So he'll place his taxi ticket right here, and so the detectives will only get a clue about which vehicle or mode of transport he has used, but they won't get a clue of which point he is at right now. Let's say he used the second one up. Now what about this rectangular grid? This rectangular grid, now I am at 104, and maybe I used an underground pass to go from here to here till 140, because it's red and here it ends. So I can use it, and I have my ticket in my logbook and I have covered it. So I took it to here, so 140 like so, and I'll cover it. Now what about this rectangular grid? When Mr. X comes across this rectangular grid, reveal which point he is at. So let's imagine that right now he is at let's say 184. So in this rectangular grid, he'll write 184, and only at this rectangular block will he reveal where he is at. This is the only big clue they will get about Mr. X.
Now let me tell you what the use of this black ticket and these two X2 tickets for Mr. X is, and why they're so important for him. So this black ticket, let's say we just wrote 184 here, and all the detectives are seeing it. Oh, he's at 184. But this black ticket is basically going to help you hide the spot. So from 184, suppose you took, where's 184? Suppose you're here at 184 and you take a taxi to 168. Now you write 168 on this circle, and instead of using your taxi ticket, you use a black ticket.
Because if you are at 184 and you get a taxi ticket, then they'll know that you are going to travel either here, 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 here or here,
and they will capture you. So black ticket just says black ticket on it, so they won't know what mode of transport you are using to move. Now now let me tell you what these cards do. So Mr. X has two of these cards, and these are we can say we use them to move two locations at one time. So he is at 168 now, as he used the black ticket and is right over here. So now let's say the detectives are very close to him and he needs to go and use a mode of transport quickly. So what he can do, right over here he can place this ticket, and now over here from 168 he can go 2 steps forward like this or like this, and he can move just 2 locations to 2 points.
But remember, that doesn't mean that you do not write the points here. It's necessary to write the points in the logbook.
And after that, wherever you land, again you write it down under here.
Let's give you a little example of how the game is played. We are 2 players. 2 players aren't possible, but we'll just give you a little glimpse of how it is played. You can play. There can be 3 players, 4, 5 or 6 players.
So,
because in these numbers you can easily divide it. You also get this rule book, and you can refer to it to know that how you can equally distribute the pawns among this amount of players. Now let's begin our trial game. Cover the rules of the game once more and try and play it a little bit.
now let me show my character. So this is my character. I have chosen to be the purple detective, and I am a detective and she is the fugitive X. So let's start playing a little demo game.
And also an important notice is that Mr. X gets one underground ticket, one bus ticket and one taxi ticket. And he gets all the black tickets, all the X2 tickets and the blank ticket. He also has the logbook, his grid and a pencil or a pen. You may be wondering why Mr. X only gets one of each transport ticket. That's because he is gonna collect more tickets along the way from the detectives. Let us begin. So you are the detective, please speak.
So I'm going to pick this card and I'm going to show you I got 174. Now the disadvantage is that even Mr. X gets to see where I am. So 174, so I'm just going to, here, this is 174 here, it's near goods station. So I'm going to put my pawn over here. This is my starting point and now it's
And this is my card.
So now I do not know where the starting point of Mr. X is. So I have 10 taxi tickets, 8 bus tickets and 4 underground tickets. So here I have access to 2 lanes of bus and I have many access to the taxi. So I choose to use my taxi ticket and I'm going to go from 174 to 161. So now I have to give this taxi ticket to Mr. X as his second taxi.
Okay, now it's time for Mr. X to come out to play. So I showed you my number and I won't tell it aloud because you all saw it right there. And you can see I have access to all the 3 modes of transport. So I wish to go towards the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to observe the number. So right. Okay. So now I want to travel by using an underground ticket. So we are going to put it on my logbook, but also I'll have to write it down. So it's 22, right? And now we're going to cover it with my underground ticket.
So the game goes on like this. Once a detective loses all his tickets, that means Mr. Fugitive wins the game. And if I have enough tickets to catch Mr. X, then that means that
If you have caught the fugitive as a detective and you have no cards, if you've caught it, then you've won. If you have cards but you've still not got the detective, you've lost. If you have no cards and you haven't got the fugitive, then you've lost. The other case scenario could be that the fugitive has won, has more tickets and is away from you, and he can lose if all the detectives have successfully caught him. This is how the game ends.